continues.
With each passing month, little James Leininger seemed to be peeling back memories of a past life. Vivid memories that scared and astonished his parents.
Bruce had always said, what kind of plane did you fly? And he said, a Corsair.
Yeah.
He said a Corsair?
He said the word Corsair.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did James remember flying a Corsair, he demonstrated knowledge of the plane's peculiarities, like the time he was flipping through a book about planes when he was 4.
He got to the Corsair and he said, that's a Corsair. And he goes, you know what? They used to get flat tires all the time.
In fact, historians and pilots agree that the plane's tires took a lot of punishment on landing. Of course, this is a fact that could easily be found in books or on TV. But then, James began to offer up the kinds of specific details his parents say are harder to explain away.
Another night, Bruce had come in and he said, do you remember where your plane took off? And he said it took off of a boat. Do you remember the name of your boat? Natoma. Do you remember what your name was? And he'd always say, James. But his name is James. It never really occurred to us. We thought he just wasn't understanding the question. So I said, do you remember any friends or anyone else that you flew with? And he said, Jack Larson.
Bruce began doing some research. Almost immediately, he discovered that the Natoma was an actual ship, a small aircraft carrier in the Pacific called the Natoma Bay. And Jack Larson, the Navy buddy little James recalled? Well, it turns out there was a pilot named Jack Larson who served aboard the Natoma Bay. In fact, he's alive and well and living in Arkansas.
And it was like holy mackerel. I mean, really, you could have poured my brains out of my ears. And I just couldn't believe it.
And there were more clues. Around this time, James began signing crayon drawings and other artwork, James 3.
One day I asked him why he's calling himself James 3. Well, it's because I'm the third James. And every once in a while you ask him that today, he'll still say the same thing.
And one day, while leafing through a new book about the Battle of Iwo Jima, Bruce turned to an aerial photo of the Pacific Island. James was seated nearby.
He pointed to it and he goes, Daddy, that's where my airplane was shot down. And I said, what? He said, that's my airplane got shot down there, Daddy. And I just went blank. I couldn't say anything.
By then, Bruce had become a man possessed, searching the internet, combing through military records, and interviewing men who served aboard the Natoma Bay. Finally, a breakthrough. He learned that there was just one pilot from the squadron killed at Iwo Jima. That pilot, James M. Houston Jr. Is this why little James was calling himself James 3?
It just crystallized in my mind. This has to be who we're talking about. You know, my meter of skepticism was starting to go over toward belief.
When little James would describe being shot down, he told of how his plane had sustained a direct hit on the engine.
We had an airplane, and I said, well, can you show me where it was? And he pointed right up to the front of the engine.
That's what makes this man's story so intriguing. His name is Ralph Clarber. Clarber was a rear gunner on a TBM Avenger that flew off the Natoma Bay. On March 3rd, 1945, he took part in a raid near Iwo Jima. As it happens, Clarber's plane was right next to the one flown by James M. Houston Jr. It was to be Houston's last mission before leaving for home the following day. As Clarber recalls, the sky was thick with enemy flight.
We experienced pretty heavy aircraft fire, but this was the most intense that I experienced at any time.
Suddenly, a flash near the nose of Houston's plane.
I saw the hit. I would say he was hit head on. Yeah, right on the middle of the engine.
Just as little James had described it. So what do you believe now about your son James?
I believe that he had a past life. I believe that in his past life he was James M. Houston Jr.
Okay, that actually continues for some more time, but I've just cut short. They basically interview the sister of that James, you know, that pilot who died, his sister, and the various things that James, the government had sent several of that pilot James' property to the sister, and this boy gets all of that and all that stuff. So they show that later on. I just cut that short. thing. Now, another interesting thing is all these children, by the time they are 7-8-year-old, they forget everything. So it's not that they remember this all life. They remember only from the ages 2 to 5. That's what they say. After 6-7 years, they tend to forget. Just like all of us also forget what happened when we were 3-year-old. Similarly, these children forget that memory that they got in 3-year-old also. They will become like normal kids later in life. It's only in that period that they remember it at night. So this is what is called as a reincarnation case. You understood this? So now the point why I'm using this over here is, in the singular model that we have today, the singularity model as in there's nothing beyond the body and this is the ultimate stuff. This kind of thing which is observed, and it's not observed 1 or 2, there are thousands of such observations across the world. I mean, there are all kinds of observations. There's another observation that I read here in Stevenson's book. He talks about a Canadian man who remembered his life as a British officer in World War II whose nails were plucked out by the Nazis. And he was, from childhood only, had a phobia about nail. His problem was, if anybody would touch his nail only, he would feel pain or fear. And it turned out that this whole experience came out of his nails being plucked out and being killed, and they again went back and verified. They found out that yes, indeed, there was this guy who had died in World War II. So you understand, this is basically a reincarnation case. It comes as with great pain. It's not very pleasurable for these kids to remember their past lives. So all I have to say is that why I'm using it is, I'm using it to say that the Indian system of Sankhya does talk about reincarnation. It does talk about a soul separate from the body, the unit of consciousness that survives death. However, in our modern understanding of singularity, we have no way to understand it. So even though there are so many things like this, but still you cannot prove the soul, because again, by definition, the soul is not matter. So because it's not matter, it cannot be seen, it cannot be tasted, smelled, heard, touched. So you're stuck. So if you ask the question, can I prove the soul by showing it? Well, that's ruled out because that doesn't exist. Okay, there's another body of evidence that I would like to talk about. That's perhaps the last thing that I would like to talk about today. That's something we call as near-death experience. So now let's hear what this is. This is also a very interesting domain. If you type anything on Google, you can get more cases. Near-death experience, as the word suggests, means there are people, patients, who have a near-death experience. Near-death experience as in, they either meet with a major accident, or they have some bypass surgery or some very major life-critical operation where they are lying down and the ECG waves are basically flat, right? So that means they are technically unconscious. They are not supposed to know what's happening. That's what it means, right? They are unconscious. Clinically, medically they are unconscious. But all these people, they say later that when that operation was going on, they found themselves out of the body. That's what they report. The patient reports himself to be outside the body, seeing his own body, and not only seeing his own body, seeing various doctors and nurses standing around them, who stood where, who had what in their hand, and what they were talking to each other. And interestingly, so there is this guy called as Michael Sabam, who is a Russian doctor who has done a lot of research in this field. So there are also doctors, like there's one Kenneth Ring, he's an American doctor, who has researched on blind people undergoing NDE. That means this fellow is congenitally blind, he's born blind, so he has not seen anything. But during near-death experience, he reported being outside and seeing. You understood? And then they come back and they say things which confirm to what actually happened. You understood? So this is again a huge body of evidence which exists. So apparently there is something beyond the singular body which was seeing the body. So what is that? From science perspective, we don't know, because, right? Because these doctors say that at this point of time, these patients had a flat ECG signal. So they are not supposed to be aware only of what is happening. And it's not that they are dreaming also at that time. They cannot be, by definition. Clinically, they cannot be. So there are many cases they say. Like for example, there's one case from Sabam's textbook. So Sabam talks of this patient whom he had, whose name was Maria, this lady. So this lady was undergoing a, what is that? Yeah, she had a cardiac arrest. So she was undergoing some kind of bypass or something, where she was clinically supposed to be unconscious, and her bed, he says, was near a window. And this Maria reported after coming back later that when the operation was going on, she said, I was outside my body. I not only saw all the doctors, nurses, but I was also going in and out of the window. And I also saw a shoe which is lying 2 floors down, you know, on the extension of a window. Just like any window is there, sometimes the window has a small extension, and there was one tennis shoe over there. So this Maria said. Now the interesting thing is that from the window, if you bend, you cannot see it. You have to really go outside to see it, or you have to go to an opposite building and using a binocular see it. So this Maria said that she saw all this, and when she comes back, she says this to Sabam and whoever other doctors were there, that this was her observation. So they understood that yes, what she's saying is true. She is not faking it, because she's talking about real information which she shouldn't have understood at the time of her coma. That means when she was in coma, she's not supposed to know these things. You understood? So this is called as a near-death experience. Scientifically, they know that people undergo near-death experience. Medically, we know it. But why you undergo, again, in the singular model, you cannot talk about it. You understood? So I am giving near-death experience and past life memories as 2 examples, which are modern phenomena that are observed in today's world, but which the singular model fails to address, but dualism addresses. That's all I'm saying. So these guys, they feel that they are dead. They feel that they are outside the body. They feel dead. They feel light floating above their own body. They feel, this is what they report after they come back. So they feel themselves out of the body and seeing their own body. You understood? Now there are many other things also, please remember. Just there is NDE, there is another, I'll just take another 10 minutes. I started later, sorry for that, but I'll conclude in 10 minutes. I want to finish this class. You have another class right now, 3 o'clock? Just give me 10 more minutes. There's another interesting thing called OB. OB means out of body experience. Out of body experience means this is much rarer. This is not as widely reported as NDE or past life. This is a very rare phenomenon. This is a phenomena where there are people who had, in modern times also and in ancient times also, who had this ability or power where, you know, they had powers like clairvoyance, telepathy, etc., where they could go out of their body, see something or do something, and then come back in their body. You understood? That's technically what is called as a out-of-body experience. So basically, there are some things which are recorded in modern literature. I would like to read some of them. So as the Indian literature is full of all such experiences and examples. So just like in India, before I come to the example of Stalin that I'm going to take to talk about out-of-body experience, which is recorded in modern books. Like in India, there is this story of the saint whose name was Adi Shankaracharya. So the Adi Shankaracharya, it is said that he was a South Indian sannyasi who traveled over India, and it is said that when he came to one place in Varanasi, he had a debate with one scholar whose name was Mandana Mishra, very famous scholar, and their debate was that they decided we will debate on any topic, and whoever loses the debate should become the disciple of another. So that was the standard in India in those days. Okay, so 2 people debate, and then whoever loses should become the other fellow student. So they said fine. So Shankara defeated Mandana Mishra in every topic. So the Mandana Mishra was a married gentleman, whereas Shankaracharya was a sannyasi from the age of 8. You know, he was a celibate, monk. So finally Mandana Mishra suggested to Shankara that, okay fine, all this is fine. Let's now debate on sex psychology. So Shankara said, hey wait, I have not experienced this. I have been a monk from the age of 8. So I have not experienced sex. I can't debate on that. Mandana Mishra said, I don't care about that. We had decided to debate on every topic, and this is also one topic only. So Shankara said, okay, since you claim to say, so this is a biography I'm talking about. So of course this is not a modern thing, but still I'm giving you as an example of what is OBE. So Shankara says that, okay fine, you give me 1 month time. I'll debate on this as well. So he says fine. 1 month is okay, he says. So then Shankara tells his disciples that this is the body of a sannyasi, so I cannot experience sex in this. So he says that, but I have an ability to get out of this body. So he puts his own body in a pot of oil, he quits his body, the soul. That's actually an out of body. We'll come to modern examples soon. He goes into the body of the king of Varanasi, and the king obviously has queens and all that stuff. So he sees through his body what is actually sex life. Just like what is the whole concept of, again going back, the ghost and the concept of possession means what? Possession basically means the ghost is an entity which is a soul with a subtle body, so there are desires, but because he cannot fulfill his desires, he superimposes himself on another system where he fulfills his desires through and comes back. So similarly, so he goes out, he stays in the body of the king, and then he comes back into his own monk body, and then he debates with Madana Mishra and defeats him on that as well. And that's how the story ends basically. So this is a traditional OB story that we have in India, but there are several modern stories. I'll just take one example. This is basically, this is all coming under. See, one thing I wish to tell you that there are several. In our modern science and our education, we mainly study mainstream stuff. You understand what is mainstream? What is kind of regular stuff? But even in modern observations, there are a lot of stuff that are not so regular, but which are documented, which are accepted, but they are not spoken of because we don't have proper theories in our modern science to accommodate or explain them. You understood? Like for example, there are extrasensory perceptions like telepathy, retrocognition, precognition, clairvoyance, psychokinesis. These are all phenomena which different people in the last 100 years have demonstrated. All over the world, people have documented it and so on. But the whole problem is, because it is something out of mainstream and we cannot explain it, we generally ignore it. But if you take all the body of evidence at once, and especially if you compare it and look at the Indian system of philosophy through the light of this, you get several connections. That's what I'm trying to do here. So basically, this psychokinesis is an ability where a person can get out and influence the mind of another. So during the Cold War, Russians they searched the world over to find people who had these abilities and employed them. So this is a recorded thing. So Stalin, for example, had this fellow whose name was Wolf Messing. So this fellow was a psychokinesis expert. And so he basically tested him. So he gave him a test. So these things are all recorded in various journals. So in 1940, this test was conducted. And later he served him for several years after that. So what he told him is to do a psychic bank robbery. So psychic bank robbery, this was a test for Wolf Messing. So Wolf Messing was asked to go to the Moscow Gauss Bank and hand the cashier a blank piece of paper. Okay, so he told him that do one thing in order to prove. So Stalin told Messing that in order to prove that you have this ability of psychokinesis, where you can go out and influence another's mind and do something, go to this Moscow Gauss Bank and give an empty blank piece of paper to the cashier and keep a suitcase. And that fellow should put in the suitcase 100,000 rubles. Ruble is the currency of Russia at that time. So this fellow goes there and he gives the cashier a blank piece of paper and a briefcase. And that fellow immediately looks at the blank piece, keeps it aside, takes 100,000 rubles, puts it in the briefcase, and Wolf Messing walks out and hands it over to Stalin. Test 1 successful, I passed it. So then he tells him, okay, now do one thing, go and return it back, otherwise the cashier will be disturbed later. So this fellow Messing again goes into the bank and goes to the same teller and gives the cash. The cashier looks at Messing, the cash, and then he looks at the blank piece of paper on his table. Immediately he gets a shock, a mild heart attack, and he falls on the ground because he realized what he did. You understood? So this is psychokinesis. Psychokinesis is the ability to get out of your body and project something in somebody's mind and do something. So some people are born with that ability. These are again things you cannot explain in a normal sense, but in the Samkhya model of dualism, everything becomes easily explained. So Stalin did another test. I think I'll end with that as far as this topic is concerned, but if you explore literature, you can find hundreds of such material. So Stalin, the next thing he tells him that, he tells him that you come to my office to meet me, but what I will do is, I will have so many guards, and all my guards will be told not to allow anybody inside. So Stalin is the dictator of Russia at that time. But still you should project onto them that you are an exception and you should walk through them. This is fine. So, Messing, what he does is, he walks through the high security government building where Stalin's office is, and none of the guards stop him. They give way to him because he mentally projects onto everybody that I am an exception to any rule. And that mental projection is accepted by every guard, and they all give way to him. And he walks right into Stalin's bedroom and meets him and says hello. And Stalin says, you managed it. So then onwards he employs him basically. So, so this is a story from there are many stories of the USSR who employed people with so these kind of abilities are all related to the normal out-of-body experiences that we talk about. So that's another thing. This is a very rare thing, please remember. This is not as much observed as ND. Like, if these kind of experiences run into thousands, this will be one case, OB. This is something that somebody has to be born with it. It's like an ability that somebody has, where he can go out of his body and project something on somebody's mind. But I'm just trying to tell you that there are evidences. All these evidences I'm using it to show my theory or the axiom that I started off with of Purusha and Prakriti being two separate entities, where there is a unit of consciousness and this. So now I think I just wish to conclude with just one point. We just conclude with some famous personality. So first of all, this concept of reincarnation as far as Western religious philosophies are concerned, like the Abrahamic world does not formally accept reincarnation. Like if you see Christianity, Islam or Judaism, their concept is that the soul is only in the human, and at the time of death the body is buried, and at the day of judgment every soul is binarily sent to heaven or hell. That's the Judo-Christian Islamic concept in terms of, how they accept the soul, but they don't accept the concept of rebirth. It's only the Indian system that talks about this whole concept of rebirth. You understood? So that's how the philosophy is. But Westerners as such have accepted reincarnation. So whether it is Benjamin Franklin or even a guy like Socrates, they have written very elaborately about reincarnation. Right? They have written about it, their personal belief. So that's one thing. Okay, Shukla, I already told you the story. So I just would like to end with this simple point that the most simple proof that Sankhya says for everyone to understand that he's not the body, but he's something beyond. I'll just read that up. Just 1 second, give me. Once again. Just try to see this simple experiment that Sankhya talks of to understand the concept of dualism. The experiment is this. Try to take a look inside yourself. Gently endeavor to feel the personal I, the underlying nucleus of your experience. So, in all of us, there is this I, there is this integrated experience that we are having. There is some entity that is experiencing everything. So, who is it? So, all I wish to say is that this unit of consciousness which we are defining in Sankhya philosophy here, this unit of consciousness is the entity that is aware of the system. The aware of the person. That means that unit of consciousness is aware of the pleasure, the pain, the happiness, the distress. You cannot look at that unit of consciousness by sidestepping it. You understand what I say? That means you cannot try to look at that consciousness itself. Like for example, nobody can say my soul, in the sense that it's like I can look at my hand, I can observe the pleasure and pain of my hand. I can look at my mind, I can look at the pleasures and pain of my mind. I can be aware of that. But can I sidestep my own consciousness and look at it? I cannot, because I sidestep along with it. As in, I cannot do that. So that's something very amazing. Okay, so this is the basic stuff in terms of selfhood. So this is the introductory talk on Sankhya. There are 2 more sessions. One session where I talk in detail about the mind, which is yet to come. And another session where we talk about what I call as the modes of nature, the Prakriti, to be analyzed. So these 2 sessions will come next time. So please note, next time we will have the test. I'm sorry for postponing that, but we will have the test next time. So next Tuesday, after my class will be there regularly from 1 to 3, the test will be at 3 o'clock. So You will have work here till 4 o'clock. So, yeah, you will have to be here till 4 o'clock next time. Because 1 hour is a test for half an hour, 45 minutes, and 2 hours my regular class. So, and there will also be some homework that will now start coming up on the site. So, you'll have to keep a watch for deadlines. That's it. Till now, I never gave you any work to do because we have just started. But now onwards, there'll be some things that you'll have to submit and so on. So, any questions before we just conclude? Sorry for, I think I went for a long time. I didn't take questions for that. Any quick questions or comments? Yeah, just take 5 minutes. I'll take not much.
So, as you said that between the ages of 2 to 4, people recall past experience.
Those children, yeah.
So, doesn't it stay in the unconscious mind of the brain and it can be triggered later?
Yeah, so Ian Stevenson says that there is a method called hypnotic regression, which some psychiatrists have tried. Hypnosis means to get out from your mind, and they sometimes get it. But the challenge in hypnosis is that the memories that come sometimes are mixed. Like for example, you may have seen a mountain and you may have seen gold. So in hypnotic regression, you say that you saw a golden mountain. But you have actually not seen a golden mountain. The mind is overlapping two images over there. So hypnotic regression is not that solid a proof for past life as children spontaneously remembering past life. Because there the impressions in the mind are even more strong. But he does say that in hypnotic regression from the subconscious mind they dig out these things. That is there. Good point. Any other question? Yeah.
Sir, are there any cases where people remember other than human lives?
Very good question. Unfortunately, there aren't. All the thousands of cases that are there. See, the point is